Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the NYRA official podcast. We are the National Youth Rights Association. So we're just going to go ahead and start our first, podcast episode. We're going to be talking about youth rights, like what our organization does, how we advocate for youth rights, and just the big issues we like to cover. So if everyone wants to go ahead and introduce themselves, I'll introduce myself first. I'm Zane. When I publish blogs, I go by Zillion, and stuff like that. I joined NYRA about like a month ago, and yeah, so I've been just focusing on writing blogs and stuff. So yeah, everyone else can go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Eric. I also do blog writing. I go by Youth Lib Activism. I also do some protesting around Seattle for youth rights. And I go to speak to city council sometimes also about youth rights. Yeah.
I guess I'll go ahead. I'm Susan. I joined NYRA maybe almost a year ago. It was because I'd heard about NYRA a while ago. I've been interested in youth rights for so long, like since I was a kid, and I looked it up at one point, and I'm like, oh, this organization is doing some cool stuff, and I kind of always had it in my back of my mind to get involved at some point. When Imogen, who was right beside me here, was just talking about being interested in doing some stuff for youth rights, I remembered about NYRA, and then we both got involved with it. And we're in Seattle also, so we've gone with Eric to protest a few times. Haven't been to City Hall yet to do that, but that sounds like a good thing to do in the future, and just hoping to ways to do stuff for youth rights.
Hi, I'm Imogen. York has said why join NYRA, but I guess I guess I have a background in SDE because I spent 7 years at a Sudbury school, and then at 12 transitioned into unschooling. So that's kind of my background, and was inspired to join NYRA because I was a bit doomery about the state of youth rights, and still am, but I'm more hopeful.
I go by Underdeveloped Prefrontal Cortex Online. I posted a blog post about Power School and the data breach that they had. It mostly affected students. I think it was a few million. And I joined NYRA around the same time as Susan and Imogen did. And yeah, I do blog posts. I edit it.
I think we should talk about for youth rights and stuff. What do y'all think are the most important aspects of youth rights that need advocating for in this day and age? What do you think the most important things that we're kind of focusing on advocating for, and that you think is the most important? Get the word out, spread awareness, stuff like that. What do y'all think?
I think my top three, at least from my experience, would be freedom of movement, the rights to go where you want, just in general. Stuff like more decision-making power, legal autonomy, kind of the right to make your own decisions, and then, of course, voting rights as well.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I would kind of agree for the most part. I feel like voting rights is definitely one of the most important things because, the policies that get made, that get put in place, they kind of get put in place because we don't have enough people that would, it would actually affect, voting against it. Because, if it only affects people under 18 and then people under 18 can't vote, it's they can't really, have their voice out there in, government of being hey, we don't want to vote for these types of things. So yeah, voting rights, definitely a really important issue. Probably the most important. And also I feel property rights and then social media bans is a big thing, censorship and stuff like that, because, I'm really against censorship, especially on social media and stuff. And I feel the internet should be a free place for people of all ages, and your ability to access certain things shouldn't be limited by your age, so that's kind of where I'm at the most important issues.
It would be a big one for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything everyone has already said. Censorship, because that's such a timely one right now, and it's kind of related to freedom of movement, because sort of before the internet, there has always been an issue about banned books, which is the best way to get people to read a book is ban it. But as younger people had more freedom of movement, that kind of has been taken away slowly, like over the years. But the internet has still been a place where young people can find each other, find information, do various things. And now there's all of a sudden all this interest in removing that freedom as well. So both are connected in my mind as just sort of general human right. And then with rights, really important one, because that any one vote that anyone is going to do that much, but that's more comes back to sort of the cultural, like, how do we view younger people? Like if we, there's just something, and when people have the right to vote, it means they're equal in our society. And so that's just a very important one it's low risk to have younger people voting. So it's not likely to like be as scary to people somehow. Maybe it is. I don't know, but it seems like possible to do that one. But
you are to
16.
I don't think it's scary. If you get lower, then people start to be afraid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like something along with that is like realistically, high schoolers, like in most schools, they have requirements of like in order to graduate high school, it's like you have to like, take a government class, take an economics class about that. So a lot of high schoolers are, kind of are like pretty well educated on these types of things for the most part. And like a lot of people, like just like adults, like out in the world, they really aren't. So it's like when you really look at it, it's like a lot of high schoolers probably know more about like government and stuff than just like the random adult on the side of the road. But it's like, oh, they can't have the right, but the high schoolers don't have the right to vote because society views them as like lower. It's like, oh, you're not smart enough, you don't know as much, you're not mature enough. But it's like realistically, they probably like have more of a knowledge of those things than a lot of adults do. So it's kind of goes back to how like society views young people as in they're kind of like at a lower level of person than adults and stuff. And I feel like that's definitely like a big problem in the way like society views them.
I also think young people have more knowledge of like the current political landscape, like what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I think that's certainly true a lot of time. And voting age voting isn't supposed to be about intelligence. Like it's supposed to be about being affected by these laws, and people view like the difference between a 16-year-old and a 20-year-old so night and day.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even if we're talking about maybe young people who are a little less politically informed, like they're still everybody is politically informed, I think, today on some level. People have different political views from their parents. People have different political views from the people around them. I don't think it makes any sense to restrict young people from voting when they clearly, have so much knowledge about the political climate.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly an amount like comparable to adults.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really almost any argument that can be applied to kids, that they shouldn't vote, can also be applied to adults. And if it's ridiculous to suggest that to restrict or to take away voting rights from adults, just because there's propaganda aimed at them, or maybe they're not as knowledgeable on these issues, right? And it's ridiculous as well to suggest that kids should not be able to vote just because there's propaganda aimed at them, or their parents might influence their decisions, because they're people too. And ultimately, like Zane was saying, they are living in the same society, so they're affected, and it's kind of a right.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I understand when we're talking about like 5-year-olds or something, because maybe the concerns about like parental manipulation or TV advertising in children, so like they hold some weight. But when we're talking about 16-year-olds, when we're talking about 17-year-olds, when we're talking about 15-year-olds, like it's just not an issue. Like I don't think parents have full control over their 16-year-old children, where they would vote however their parents told them to. I don't think that's, happening. It's a stereotype that young people are, rebellious and don't do what their parents tell them to, which whole other thing.
I also think most people kind of just vote along with the people around them. So, like, I don't think it's that different.
That's true. That's not really a reason to tell someone they can't vote, because if they trust someone, whether that person is their parent or their friend, or they're looking for a newspaper endorsement or whatever it is, that is their right to vote how someone else is suggesting. But also, like, it's always worth remembering, like, we've been through this before, when, like, before women had the right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
All of these exact same arguments came up, like, they're not as well informed, or that's just gonna mean their husband is gonna manipulate them and we'll get 2 votes. And it's just always the right way to go historically, to, like, expand who can vote and not take that away.
Yeah, that's actually interesting that you bring that up about how it relates to women, because I'm pretty sure in certain areas there's still laws about like there's specifically laws aimed towards like making sure there's like a husband and a wife can't enter the voting booth at the same time or something. I'm pretty sure there's something about that, because they were afraid originally that the husband would like force the wife into like voting the same way that he was, something like that. So they wanted to make it to where they had that privacy to where they couldn't vote, like they couldn't like be like vote at the exact same time or something. I'm pretty sure I heard something about that. But it's kind of interesting. And also kind of goes back to like independent thought. It's like, I guess you kind of worry. I guess there's like some of the worry is like you're worried that kids are just going to be too manipulated or too manipulatable into voting like a certain direction. But realistically, I mean, that's kind of going against like independent thought of teenagers and young people. And that's kind of the way that a lot of people in society see them, a lot of adults, is like, oh, you're just going to think what you see in the internet, or you're just going to think like what your parents think. But it's like, a lot of people, like young people, especially who are really politically informed, like they're going to be really invested in these issues, and they're going to be trying to like think about things their own way instead of just the information that's been allotted to them. And I feel like those types of people are really going to be the ones that are going to be using their right to vote. Like maybe the average teenager that doesn't really care about politics, doesn't really care about voting, doesn't really care about the issues. It's like they're not even going to bother going to the voting booth. Like they're just going to just sit at home and just do whatever they want. But then, like the people who actually really care about the issues and they're really passionate about them, those are going to be the people that are going out there and voting. So I feel like it kind of takes away people who like are actually really inclined to be passionate about political topics.
I guess people are always talking about, well, what if their parents influence, how a kid might vote? And I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with that, as long as the parent isn't controlling how the kid votes, right? Or how the kid participates in society. For example, right, if you were to live in Seattle, either, today or like in the past 20 years, rent prices have been going up. And so if your parents can no longer afford to pay rent in Seattle, right, you'll have to move to the suburbs, or you'll have to move somewhere else. And again, life tends to get harder. And so if a parent and a kid voted the same way, to voting for somebody who promises to reduce rents, right, or create affordable housing, right, that's something that, that might happen, and nobody would really argue against it. Mm-hmm. I don't think that parents influencing their kids is a bad thing. I just think that parents controlling their political participation would be a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think there can be pretty easy like precautions to make sure that doesn't happen. Like I mentioned earlier about making like certain laws to make sure it's like, oh, like the parent and like the kid can't enter like the voting booth at the same time. So it's like the kid can just vote for whatever they want, and then it's like the parent can't like see it. So it can't be like, oh, if there's like a really controlling parent who would be like, oh, you better vote this way or I'm going to punish you. It's like they wouldn't see what the kid voted to. Like they can tell the kid to vote. They can be like, hey, vote this way. But it's like they can't really see what they actually voted to. So if the kid, like had some independent thought, or like they disagreed with what the parent wanted, they could always just go in there, vote for what they actually want to, and then come out and then just be like, oh yeah, I voted for what you told me to. And like, I can't really do anything against that. So I feel like as long as there's like necessary there'd need to be necessary precautions in place to make sure that they wouldn't get overly manipulated. But I feel like that'd be doable.
Yeah, I think there is a bit that would have to be done. Like, I think the best idea would just to, schools are already voting locations in a lot of areas. Like, that's where people go to vote on voting day.
Mhm.
Voting day. I don't know if that's what it's called. So just make it so, the young people can vote while they're in school. And I feel like that's a really easy solution. Most people go to school. You can have it like sort of mail-in voting where it's there's maybe a 2 week period where the young person can vote, just so they can't be sick that day or whatever. And you'd have to update voting rules, but I think it's totally doable.
I think that's a great idea. I was at a protest today, and I was talking to somebody about youth rights, and they raised the concern that parents might, just mark whatever on the ballot, right, and then turn it in for the kid. And I also said that what if like the ballots were delivered through the schools? Like, what if, since every kid is registered at a school in X school district, right? What if the ballots were delivered at schools? What if kids voted in schools?
Yeah.
There's no real room to manipulate there. And it's where every kid is, so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that would also
for
bring up.
homeschooled kids, you have to think of something different. Like maybe a social worker comes over and like set up a booth in the car. I'm not really sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it would definitely have to be different for homeschooling people, but it could be a workaround.
You could just have homeschoolers show up that day at their local school and vote there.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I think the issue is you wouldn't because right now, the current world that we live in, most correspondence, would be through the parents. I think, because we don't want to legally mandate people to have to go to the voting booth. Mm-hmm. That might be the only way to do it to make sure parents can't stop their children from voting. So that's why I was thinking have someone come over. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm just not sure.
It's like in Washington State, it's all mail-in voting. Anyway,
it's all mail-in, or most people.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was the will to lower the voting age, all of these details could be figured out. So
yeah, it is more about the will. It's more about the way that people see it, and a lot of the time, it's really difficult to get things like this passed for youth rights because not a lot of people really care about the issues. It's there isn't a massive movement that is actually going to put pressure on politicians to be hey, let's lower the voting age, let's get this down. So I feel that's definitely the steps that need to be taken of organizations like ours and other people just kind of putting the awareness out there and be hey, this is a real issue. These young people, they're passionate about politics. They're getting affected by these issues that everyone else is getting affected by, but their voices can't be heard. And that's kind of unfair, obviously, to them. And I feel it's just
that's definitely the goal of NYRA right now, just to boost youth rights as a concept that people want to fight for.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I think there really hasn't been a large movement, simply because youth rights is really such a foreign concept, like you were saying. When I was in school, and I guess a lot of my friends, we believe that kids should have more rights in general, more power in their own families.
Mm-hmm.
But youth rights is, again, it's such a foreign concept. It's not widely discussed. And there's a lot of censorship in schools. There's a lot of control in schools, right? And so I think, as a movement, we, it would be, really beneficial, to have unofficial clubs in schools, or
mm-hmm.
have, people in schools, right, who can really spread the message, right? Because it's really there that you'll find a lot of people who support you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely, I completely agree with what you were saying about that it's a foreign concept. A lot of people, a lot of adults, especially, they don't, if they hear someone talking about youth rights, they assume the worst. For example, this is kind of a weird example, but my bio on Twitter, it has minors rights advocate in the bio. So sometimes I'll make a comment about something political completely unrelated to youth rights. And then people will go to my bio and they'll be oh, minors rights advocate, what are you, a pedophile? And they'll just say stuff like that. And it's So the first, so they
There's been some real pedophile fear mongering.
literally, that's what I'm saying. It's like when people
I was gonna write a blog post about this, but then I kind of got stuck, and now I'm not.
that you definitely should, because that's a really real thing, because people see youth rights and they immediately connect youth rights to pedophilia. They immediately do, and it's like it's crazy that's where their mind goes. Like they see something about kids having rights, and their first thought is, oh, but the right of adults to have sex with them. It's like, no, why? That's so
Yeah.
wrong. Like,
Right.
Oh, that's
Like,
so
it doesn't make sense, you know, because like I've lost a few friends when I've from protesting youth rights, you know, because I'll be holding out my sign, I'll hold my sign, you know, I'll take pictures, I'll put it on my Instagram, whatever.
mhm.
And my friend will message me and they're like, "What are you, a pedophile?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? I'm protesting for rights for kids. How is that connected?" You know?
Mhm.
But it's so crazy that somehow in the public consciousness, you know, kids having more like human rights is connected to pedophilia. Like that doesn't it doesn't make sense.
It's I mean,
Yeah.
as every statistic shows, most pedophiles are, you know, the victims of are most likely people that they know. So it's usually like someone. If you're a victim of a sexual assault as a kid, it's going to be someone that you know. A
Yeah,
relative.
it's going to be your
Yeah.
parents, a relative, like a friend of a relative.
It's
You
not
know,
someone.
stranger on the internet, stranger on the street. That does happen, but it's a lot of times just in the home that they don't have, you know,
Yeah,
the right
so
to
right.
leave.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So more rights can only improve safety for young people, I think, by any logic. But like, you know, the fear mongering, like you just throw out the word pedophilia, and that's enough to
Yeah.
take away right. That's enough to say like, oh, no one under 18 should ever like speak with anyone over 18 because pedophiles, you know. It's a really serious stereotype that
Mhm.
you know it's real, and it's a really hard one to start talking
Yeah.
about because it's just so
Yeah.
inflammatory.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, you know, pedophilia is more common than pro youth rights activism, like by a long shot. And that's just crazy, you know. But that's kind of where the reality is, you know, nobody's even heard of youth rights, so you have to connect it to something.
And it's like that's the first thought in people's brains, and it's like it's kind of sad that it's like instead of thinking about like rights and like civil rights and like improving things for people, they just like immediately go to the most negative thing possible for that, and it's just like the way.
I would just like to say, you know, we're a youth rights organization, we're a youth led organization, so we have, you know, well, two people in this call, me and Imogen are under 18, and you know, Zane is literally 18. So, you know, this is not like adults saying like we want you to have more rights. This is, you know, yeah, and there's a lot, you know, outside of this call that are also so, you know, this is adults and youth working together to, you know, try to expand youth rights. This is not, there are plenty of young people here, there are plenty of not young people here. You know,
yeah, because it's really it's an issue of like human rights. It's like human rights shouldn't really be controversial, but you know, a lot of people like to take it in the most negative way possible. And then, like, you know, kind of like Imogen was saying, it's fear mongering that people put out there to like be like, oh, we should ban kids off social media because what if they happen to talk to a pedophile? It's like, but that's realistically, it's like comparing the rates of that. It's like out of like every 100 pedophile cases or like child abuse, like sexual abuse types of cases, it's usually people in the family. Like it's like their like parents, uncles, like family friends, stuff like that, compared to like some random dude on the internet being like, hey, come into my van, come like go all the way over here and stuff like that, you know? So it's like they use it as an excuse. They're like, oh, we're doing this, we're going to ban kids on social media to protect them. It's for their own good. It's to protect them. But we know that's not the case. They just want to control. They just want censorship. They want to like have power over people that they feel are like below them.
Right, and all censorship does, and like extra control, all it does is make those problems worse. Right, like pedophilia will not, you know, like rates of pedophilia will not decrease, you know, because parents have more control over kids. If anything, they might increase.
Yeah, it's like a lot of, you know, the talk around these social media bans is, you know, one, we're going to, you know, decrease, like, you know, young people getting preyed on online. We're going to, and we're going to bring them closer together, you know, with their families because they're not going to be on social media all the time. And that's really, you know, not how we see that. You know, if you're bringing, you know, children closer, young people closer to the people who are more likely to actually do something, which is not to villainize parents, but and not only are you bringing them closer to parents, because that's not the real issue. The real issue is that you're bringing them further away from, you know, everybody else, from other sources of information, other ways of thinking, from, you know, even knowing what is and isn't a crime. Like,
and just extreme like power dynamics in general, like the power that husbands used to have over wives, and that slave owners used to have over black people. Extreme power dynamics, you know, in general, just cause abuse. You know, they generate abuse, and so really, you know, reducing the power disparity there, right, is only really going to have benefits.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like a lot of it, it's like these types of bands, they leave out the most vulnerable people because it's like, oh, if there's like someone who's like in a happy, like ideal, perfect family, it's like, okay, if they're not on social media, that's still bad, but it's like, okay, yeah, they're with their good family. But it's like it's leaving out the most vulnerable people who, like, let's say they live in an abusive family where it's like the more time they spend around like their parents or anything like that, like the more like room there is for abuse, or like they can't really have a lot of friends in real life because like their parents are super controlling over who they're allowed to be friends with. They won't let them go out and like see their friends. They won't like friends come over to the house. I mean, I've had a lot of friends that I've known online that it's like their parents won't let friends come over to the house. They won't let them go over to their friend's house just because they're super controlling. They're super strict like that. So then those kids, those people who live in those situations, they then turn to other places of making friends, like social media, like platforms like Discord and stuff like that. They're like, oh, if I can't have a lot of close friends in my real life, then I'll make some online. So then taking that ability away from them is taking away, you know, their only connection to, you know, other types of people like that, and then further making them stuck in the bad situation that they're within in their homes. So it kind of disproportionately affects the most vulnerable types of people. And that's kind of the worst part about it. And I feel like that's the part the politicians don't care about when they make things like that. They just put out some blanket statement of, oh, it's protecting kids, but it's like, no, it's hurting vulnerable kids.
And you know, this is not all theoretical. Like I've had a lot of friends where you know, I've met them in real life, usually at school. It was, you know, at church for one person, and you know, I've talked with them on Discord. You know, we play games together, we talk, we call, and then they go dark for like 2 weeks, for a month, and when they come back, it's like, yeah, my parents grounded me because I swore or had an argument or whatever it is, and it's just like, wow, like that really sucks.
It's really,
and, you know, I assume that's going to be even worse with all of this, you know, thought around social media and technology and how that relates to young people. And I'm sure at some point it's going to be like they go dark forever, and it's because, you know, my parents just, you know, watched this show on Netflix that showed people being radicalized by technology, and now they don't want me to have any. And you know, that's what the vibe is. The vibe is just, you know, youth have phones, they shouldn't. Woo.
Yeah. Really, I mean, even if you are really concerned about phones, social media, you know, being dangerous to youth, which I'm not at all, but if that is what you think, how does it make any sense to completely ban that and then, like, on someone's 18th birthday, all of a sudden they have total freedom over it? It, like, whatever was so unsafe a week before is still there, and the fact that this person is now 18. So if you have a lot of concerns about safety, shouldn't that be addressed for everyone? Like if there are people who are predators on the internet, why are we punishing like the most vulnerable people who did nothing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Going back to touching on something that's Cortex said earlier, I really think that it's horrible that it's considered an acceptable punishment for parents to ban their kid from seeing their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're an adult, you know, and you're at your job and you're not performing well, right? It would be ludicrous, you know, for your employer to say, hey, so your performance review or you're poorly performing at work, so now you're not allowed to talk to people outside of work. Like what? Like that wouldn't even make sense. And it's human beings, you know, we're social, right? You know, it's important. It's an important part of our health to be social, you know, to connect. And it's really barbaric that it's considered so acceptable, you know, to ban kids from seeing their friends, you know, to ground them or to say, oh, you can't see your friends until you get your grades up or this or that, because we're social people, you know. That's kind of how we work.
Yeah, and going off that, I mean, like I've known a lot of like people that have been like, oh, I can't like. My mom's gonna like take my phone for a week because my grades are bad, or my mom won't let me go hang out with my friends because my grades are bad. And the justification for that is always like, oh, if we remove the distraction, then you'll be focused on more important things. But realistically, it's like that doesn't make sense. Instead of focusing on trying to like remove distractions, because like let's say you have a rule with your kid to where it's like whenever your grades are this bad, it's like you don't get your phone until it's better. Then the second they leave the house, they turn 18, kind of like Susan was saying, they finally go out and then they're in college or something. They have their phone all the time. They don't have mom to take it away. It's like then if they haven't developed like the skills of like, you know, kind of time management and personal responsibility, it's like, well, then the parents didn't really teach them anything. It's like the parents should be teaching the kids to be like, hey, you should be able to have access to your phone. You should be able to have access to these distractions, and then still, you know, in your own self, like manage your time to be like, okay, I can have my phone. I can get my work done. I can see my friends. I can have access to things that give me joy and happiness. And those things don't need to be taken away from me because like I'm not focused on these things. It's like you should just be focusing on like kind of prioritizing, just like talking to your kids and be like, hey, you should just, you know, you need to like manage your time instead of being like, no, we're just going to take this thing completely away from you until you've done what we want.
Yeah, and there are a lot of parents where this is kind of like the first resort, right? Is maybe for shorter time spans, I don't know, but where the first resort or one of the very first resorts is to have, you know, some sort of action taken, and it's such a lottery, you know, with all of these youth rights issues. It is such a lottery, you know. Do you get parents that are going to spank you? Do you get parents that are going to take away technology when your grades are bad? Do you get parents that are perfect and great and everything? Like, do you get parents that are going to homeschool you? Do you get parents that are going to not homeschool you? You know, do you get parents who are going to do either, depending on what, you know, you would prefer? Like, and obviously it's always going to be, you know, some sort of lottery, and I think you know, there's nothing we can really do about that. That's just kind of how having children works. But I think saying, you know, making the lottery just have less of an effect, you know, saying by making it illegal for parents to spank or hit or, you know, anything their children, by you know, giving them more rights as they grow older instead of, you know, like a few crumbs here and there, and then you hit 18 and there's all of them. You know, push some of those rights back a little. Freedom of movement, you know, the right to like own property, get a job. It's just, you know, decreasing the lottery as much as you can, making it so it's not just if you get bad parents, your life is over, you know?
Yeah. I feel like something off of that is kind of like a big thing for that, like with that lottery is like, For example, like one of the rights that kids don't really have a lot of freedom with is like therapy. It's like they can't like go and get therapy without like a parent's consent or something. There was even that law in Idaho where it's like they couldn't even access the suicide hotline without a parent's consent. Like there's been
Yeah.
laws in other states about that types of things like that. And it's like the we're making it to where kids don't have the ability, the most vulnerable kids, like the kids who are born with the parents that are like, oh, I don't believe in mental health. Because, you know, like my parents are like, well, my dad's like that. He's like, I don't believe in mental health. So it's like, okay, if I ever wanted to like ask, if I like when I was like a kid, if I ever wanted to ask and be like, hey, could I like hypothetically get therapy or something, I'd probably be like, no, absolutely not. But it's like, you know, I didn't ask that. But there's definitely people who are in those situations where it's like the parent doesn't believe in this, so then it damages the kid because of the parent's beliefs. So it's like I feel like there should definitely be ways to bypass that lottery and bypass like that parental control for the sake of the kid's best interest. Like, oh, maybe when you're a teenager, you can be like, hey, I can get therapy on my own, or like stuff like that. Like that I just like that example because it's a really like kind of sad issue that kids don't have access to, you know, mental health counseling and like medical autonomy and those types of things. um so I definitely feel like there should be laws to make sure they can bypass it. And it's like realistically, if the kids had good parents that had their best interest at heart, it's like we wouldn't need those ways to bypass it. But since there are kids who are going to be in these bad situations with these bad parents that don't care about their best interest, it's like we need those types of ways implemented into a society to bypass it.
I completely agree with that. I also think that there should be ways for kids to get medical treatments uh, or therapy as well that doesn't involve taking the parents' money. One thing that I guess was really on my mind growing up was the fact that, like, if you ever go to see a therapist, right, and your parent pays for the therapist, as soon as your parent says, "Oh, I don't like what's being discussed in this therapy appointment," right, they can cancel it because they're the ones paying for the appointment. And how money has a huge effect, right? Has like a huge, like a tangible effect on, you know, the quality of treatment you get and whether you get treatment. And I think there should be ways for kids to get treatments on somebody else's bill, right? Or maybe public health care, or in a way that their parent does not have the end all, you know, final say on whether that treatment continues. Because I think that's really important.
I feel like there's definitely ways to have that occur. Maybe like within schools and stuff, like school counselors, like maybe implement more like mental health professionals into schools. I mean, some districts do that, some don't. Kind of depends on where you're located. But I feel like, you know, like implementing that more, like using school budget on those types of things, you know, could be good to benefit kids.
I don't think counselors are like bound by HIPAA or anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yes, school is it's a difficult thing because, like Imogen was talking in the beginning about SDE, which is self-directed education, which that's a whole youth rights thing on its own. Is like kids having the right to choose their own path with education. Like why are kids required to be at school really for most of their life until turning 18? That's not exactly. In some cases, that's a better environment than being with home with controlling parents. Others, not at all. And other like there's so many problems at school. You pretty much have to. You don't have a lot of rights at school, and so that's a whole issue on its own. So I don't know, like tying youth rights to like what's happening in schools, that might be a good idea because that's where kids are. But ultimately, it just gives the schools more power. Yeah, because then you can get these things. So
yeah, I think it's kind of complicated because it's not complicated. You know, I think it's important that we say, you know, children, young people do have the right to go to school. Like if their parents want to homeschool them and, you know, the child does not want to be homeschooled and the child is capable of riding the bus, then that's what happens. You know, I think it's crazy that there are so many people that are, you know, that despise school, that are obviously, you know, forced to be there every day. And then there are, you know, some children who would love to go to school, but are not allowed to. And I think it's just kind of the worst of both worlds is what we got right now.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to that self-directed education element, like the self-direction element of the education. Like, I think self-directed education, where it's like, oh, a kid's getting homeschooled, but it's like they're choosing what they want to do because they want it, and it's what's benefiting them. I feel like that's great. But then in other circumstances, it's like, oh, here's a really controlling, like hyper religious parent taking their kid, putting them in homeschool just to like because they want to keep them away from like the brainwashing propaganda of the whatever's going on in the schools and stuff like that. So and then they will only teach them exactly what they want, which removes sources of outside information to where and then like it makes it to where they have struggles in life because like they couldn't make as many friends because they were homeschooled. They didn't really have access to like knowing as many things about the world and stuff like that. So it's kind of a double-sided sword in that type of circumstances. And it's like if the kid is self-directing their own education, then great, like homeschooling's great. But then if it comes down to the parents trying to limit the kid's education and like harm them with it, it's like, okay, then that would be a worse off situation for them.
Yeah, and I think especially with technology, like because social media bans, other websites that we may not classify as social media, like YouTube. I think Wikipedia is kind of in like a gray zone in the law, but I don't think it's been prosecuted yet. Like, it's really, but like if you still go to school, then maybe it's okay. And I'm sure realistically, a lot of the young people, the students have bypasses for, that censorship things. But if when we're thinking about homeschooled people, if they don't have technology, that's a major issue. They don't have technology. They don't if they don't like go to school, then they're just completely cut off. And I don't think we can allow that to happen or should allow that to happen. I think it honestly like it might be reasonable to just the only thing we really can do to just say like if someone is above a certain age and they're homeschooled, they need to have actual technology because otherwise it just cuts them off. And if the parents don't like that, they can send them to school.
Yeah,
that's usually my answer to the toxic homeschool parents. Like, I think the main problem with that is like censorship. Then we should just censor things less in general.
Really, for kids going to school too, that really there's so much. If you care about education these days, what you're going to learn is so much greater on the internet than really like at school or really anywhere. So when you're censoring, you're really saying we don't want you to learn what you want to learn. We're just going to put that obstacle there. So
yeah, it's like we want you to learn our way, but not your way. It's like you don't get the choice of what you learn. Yeah. We get the choice of what you learn. Which I think
so. Obviously, the internet is not perfectly reliable. We all know this information, but it does have a large amount of information if you actually know where to look for it. And I think it also when we say that whenever we're talking about this, we pretend that schools do always have the correct information, and they don't. At the very least, the information that school has to have, the information that they're telling you is several years out of date.
Yeah.
And that is an incorrectness in its own.
Yeah, but I all information has its own bias, and I think exposing people to more information is always better because then they'll have like better critical thinking skills.
Yeah. And then I'd also say a lot of schools nowadays are using without necessarily thoroughly checking it beforehand, they're using AI generated worksheets and AI generated lessons. And as everybody should know right now, AI is not reliable. AI is not reliable, and it's going to have false information, even if it's not, even if it has true information mixed in there. And with schools using that, I mean that's a huge source of misinformation that maybe you can avoid on the internet or try to avoid on the internet, but you can't avoid it if it's just a worksheet that's being given.
Also,
to you.
that's a huge double standard considering how often I've seen people complain
Yeah.
about students using like AI in their homework.
Mhm. It's
And
like
it
they,
isn't- the more
Yeah, I
sources you
have.
the more you can be aware of all of these potential pitfalls with whatever information,
yeah.
with wherever you get your information. So
And that's what I think. I mean, I feel like more information being available to students in general is always better than less information. Like, less censorship is always better than more censorship, at least in my opinion. Like, I feel like, yes, there's kind of the risk of that, like, risk of running into, like, misinformation and stuff, but the freedom of people being able to, like, find things out for themselves based on the information that's, like, available, I feel like that's, like, a right that people should have, to be able to, like, have access to everything.
Yeah, and schools have very, I don't want to say advanced because they're not advanced in a lot of cases, but they have very like intense, filtering / censorship systems. A lot of times they have like multiple at once.
Yeah.
And I've so many cases. There's an assignment, right? It has a link in it to a paper or whatever. I click on it, it's blocked. Like there's so many cases like that, and it's especially true when you're just trying to do research on your own. And I've heard of schools that block Wikipedia, that censor LGBTQ resources, that censor a whole load of information, and that's not what schools should be doing. Schools should not be, unintentionally or not, it needs to be number one priority. If you click a link on an assignment, it shouldn't be blocked. If you are searching for information, nothing should be blocked there. But that's not what we see. I think we were founded in this time. It was a few, like 20 or 30 years ago. So pretty old organization. We went through many changes. I think a few of our more active, management members have left recently, but we're also getting a lot of new people. So right now what we're doing is blog posts. We're doing this podcast. And we really want to make sure people are more informed about youth rights. We've talked about a lot of the topics already, and just making sure that, even if you're young, you still have rights. You have the right to be free from physical violence. You have the right to access information freely. And we just think it's really important to have this organization that is consistently advocating for the rights of youth.
Mm-hmm. And it's especially important because, like we've talked about before, like a lot of people don't have a concept of youth rights. Like a lot of young people don't even realize that there's organizations like us that do this type of stuff. I mean, if I knew about NYRA like 4 or 5 years ago when I was like, I would have joined this when I was like 13, 14, 15, 16. If I knew about it, but I didn't even know, just because like there's not like a huge concept of this thing existing in the world. And then like a lot of adults, like when I was talking about the stigmas, a lot of adults view youth rights in a negative way. So I feel like it's definitely important, kind of get the issues out there and be like, hey, these are real issues that young people are discriminated against in the law, and we need to focus on these issues. And people need to know that like it's an important thing to talk about, and like these issues that people are struggling with are like important real issues. So that's kind of what we're focused on, is like getting those issues out there to the world, and like advocating and be like, hey, like some of the things that are going on in the world right now, like these violations of our rights, like that's not okay. Like we shouldn't be doing that, and we're trying to get voices out there to talk about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that really seems like one of the most important things NYRA can be doing right now. I mean, we've talked about some individual issues, but really just that overall raising awareness that youth rights is a concept that's important, and there are people who care about it. So
it's really what we're trying to do. So, since this is kind of like a general introduction episode, I'm just going to talk about the content. Like, we're getting blog posts out. We just got one out the other day that I wrote about how the Supreme Court should not be lifting a ban on conversion therapy for minors. We got some more waiting that we're going to try to get out, like, once every 2 weeks type of thing. And then, we're going to start making YouTube videos. We're going to have this podcast. We're going to be appearing on other people's podcasts. We're going to be trying to make more content, maybe more social media posts, stuff like that, just ways of, getting ourselves out there. And that's what we're going to try to focus on. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So we have, as far as recent blog posts go, we have again that one on conversion therapy. We have. Do you want to talk more in depth about that, maybe?
yeah, so there's been a recent case going to the Supreme Court about conversion therapy, and about lifting the ban on it for minors. And if you didn't know, conversion therapy is basically like a therapy usually that parents put their kids into to try to like erase their LGBTQ identity. Usually trying to make it to where if like a kid is gay, trying to like turn them straight, or if a kid is like has a different gender identity than what they identified with as birth, it's like trying to change that, trying to put them more with their gender identity at birth. And it's usually, done in a conservative religious type of way. It's usually by like religious like camps and stuff like that. But the history is like really bad of what they used to do. I mean, they used to do like electroshock therapy, like nausea-inducing drugs. Electroshock, not a therapy. It's like they put like electrodes and they shocked people to try to like while exposing them to like imagery of like homosexuality, to like Pavlov them in their brain of like, okay, yeah, whenever you look at like gayness, you're gonna get like shocked, you're gonna feel pain, to try to like convert them away from that. So very terrible history, very very terrible history. So it's been banned in a lot of states for minors because of
Yeah.
because of the fact that parents were forcing their kids to go through with
Yeah.
that. Basically, it's very important that the ban on that for minors doesn't get lifted, because it's in a lot of cases torture. I mean, the statistics are pretty clear about like the kids who go through this, the LGBTQ kids go through it. The suicide rates just go through the roof. Like it's torture for them. They don't want to go through this. They end up, having suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts. It's like this should not be a thing that they should have to live through, and the statistics are pretty clear about that. Like it doesn't work. It's a bad thing. And for the Supreme Court to even consider being like, hey, let's make it to where like parents can just throw their kids into this with like no consideration to the actual rights of the children who would be forced to live through that. It's like it's kind of like a downright like disturbing type of thing, at least to me. So
Yeah.
it's really important that the Supreme Court doesn't do that. But that's a relevant news thing and youth rights, and we try to focus on these types of stories that are relevant to youth, and like how their rights could be violated. Like what are these laws? What are these decisions that are going into place that kind of go out their rights and stuff like that.
Yeah, and they may not be electrocuting people anymore, or there's so much in that article. There's a few lobotomies that have been given for homosexuality. Conversion therapy may not be about electrocution anymore, but it's still, demonstrably harmful. And it still, drastically increases the suicide attempt rate. I think it's like 40 to 60% of people who go into conversion therapy, depending on if their parents are also, making attempts or not.
Yeah.
And so it's still, deadly today, even if there's no, like abject electroshock, nausea drugs, just obvious torture going on. And so I think with the level of control that parents have over children, yeah, it is extremely irresponsible to unban conversion therapy for minors, because there is, it's not in the law that young people don't have to consent to that. And even if it was just the pure level of control that parents have over children, it would be so easy to coerce them. And it shouldn't, it's banned in, I think, almost half the states for minors, or restricted. And it needs to stay that way. I can't believe that the Supreme Court would take this case.
Yeah, it's kind of a direct violation, of youth rights, just a complete violation of, people's individual rights to like, it's basically saying that it's like, if a kid, is this way, and the parent is like, hey, I don't like the way you are. Like, I don't like the fact you're gay. I don't like the fact that you identify in a way that I don't think you should. It's like, here, we're going to basically go and we're going to put you through a program that, has torturous aspects that will lead to higher suicide rate. That does lead to higher suicide rates. That the statistics don't lie about that. So it just, incredibly irresponsible, an incredible violation of the rights of young people.
Conversion therapy is highly, manipulative and trying to just instill shame. They're doing it with words instead of, shocks now, but the goal is to make you feel, ashamed of homosexuality or, being trans or whatever it is that they don't want you to be. And to just convince you not to be that way, to shame you into not being that way, to, religious you into not being that way. And, I suppose it's better than electroshocking you into not being that way, but it's still the same core concept.
It still shouldn't even be a thing that's done on people without their consent, without them wanting to do it. It's like you're still putting them through some process that's just terrible, and it's like they didn't sign up for this, they didn't want this, they're just being forced into it. So that's kind of the root of why it's so awful, is it's them just being forced against their will to go through such a process that has negative effects on their mental health and their future.
Yeah, this is I would say one of the very few bans for minors that Naira supports.
That's fair.
It's for the most part parents forcing children.
So this was the Naira podcast. We'll be trying to get more episodes out like this. Pretty often, relatively often. There's always news that we have things to talk about. So if y'all want to join if you want to join the organization, become a member, definitely shoot us an email. If you want to help us contribute to youth rights and stuff like that. We're always looking for new people. We always want people to get the word out there about youth rights and to do what they can to advocate. And that's what we stand for. So with that, we'll probably.
So check out our blog post. You can check out our blog post. You can donate. You can fill out the form to join at youthrights.org, or you can just search Youth Rights and it should come right up. If you search just Naira, you might get the New York Racing Association instead. But Youth Rights, and you should go to our website. And we have a lot of information there. We have a lot of blog posts there. Again, I wrote one about, a data breach that had to do with, it was, a software that the school was using, PowerSchool, Schoology. And there's one about the Seattle Naira node. If you're in Seattle, please email. It's seattle@youthrights.org. And, try to join that.
And join up, yeah. So.
And I think they are in Naira, Seattle. So Susan, Imogen, and Eric. That should be it.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning into the podcast, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.